Imagine being able to turn to a skill when you feel overwhelmed by emotions and you can ride those waves of emotions instead of getting swept away by them. Tune into this video where I'm going to give you a concrete skill that you can start practicing today. So I'm going to give you a skill today from Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. It's a therapy that has a whole bunch of different skills. It focuses on 4 main modalities, and this is really the emotional regulation modality. But whether you're in therapy or not, or even coaching, this is just a skill that as a human you can start to practice because we all have emotions, and at times we might feel like we can't ride that wave of emotion. This is going to help you start to slow down. So the acronym, because DBT does a really good job of giving you a lot of acronyms to help you remember these skills to practice, is called STUNWAVE. This skill is all about helping you identify emotions by breaking down all the individual parts that come with that emotional experience so that you can name it and then be able to write it. For the S stands for sensation, the T stands for thoughts, the U stands for urge, and the N stands for name, and then waves. So I'm going to go through each one. So if we slow down, the S is sensation. So when you're having an emotional experience, it's really important to be able to name and identify your experience because that's going to help you reduce some of the overwhelm. Part of the overwhelm when it comes to feelings is we might not have the language to be able to wrap around what's going on. So that just adds kind of more fuel to the fire. So if we can start to really slow down and start to identify and notice what's happening. So the sensations is really where you're going to lean into like physically, what does this feel like? And if in my work with people, I'll always kind of pause them and have them slow down. So when they say they feel angry, okay, well, where in your body do you feel that? What's really helpful is kind of picturing like a gingerbread so you can see it here on the screen, and you can even locate like where in your body are you feeling these sensations and describe those sensations. Don't evaluate them as like, oh, I have this really scary feeling. Just actually describe what it is. I have like tension or tightness and where in your body. The T is really thought. So really start to like observe and notice, like slow down and really get conscious of like, what is my mind saying about this? So if it's helpful, you might even want to write it down because even when we write down something, it helps to even slow down that train of thinking. Or just even if you can just start to practice and notice, okay, like what is going on in my mind right now? Like what is my mind saying about this experience? And you can start to notice, and even if it's helpful, even start to say, oh, that's a judgment, that's a worry, right? That's focused on the future. Like you can even further break down some of these thoughts in like categories so that you can further notice what's going on in the landscape of your mind, like what's going on cognitively right now. The next one, U, is urge. It's where you're going to really notice without actually doing anything, because it's really important now that you don't actually just react impulsively based on the emotional state that you're in. So part of that is noticing, what is this kind of desire that I have right now to do? So is it to lash out, maybe to engage in a behavior to numb out, sex, substances, food, whatever that looks like for you? Is it to shut down? Whatever that urge is, it's just really helpful to start to identify like, what is this experience that I'm having driving me to do? And again, without actually doing anything, and even if you eventually engage in the urge, I want it to be a very intentional decision for you. I want you to at least practice the skill of noticing, and even if you do the thing, just know what's happening, what's driving you to do the thing, because then that's going to give you a leg up maybe next time to do something different. The next one, N, is name the emotion. So now it's when you're going to gather everything that you've already done, right? So looking at the sensations, the thoughts, the urges, and name your best guess of what the emotion you're feeling right now. Here's kind of a basic list of emotions for you to kind of check. Am I feeling happiness? Am I feeling anger? Whatever the case is, and maybe you're feeling more than one, but it might be helpful, just stick to one, naming the experience. Again, the naming the experience is going to be really helpful because it's going to help you kind of pick apart like what's going on for you and make it feel less overwhelming. Because when we don't have the language, or when we're starting to feel like what we're experiencing is just too much, or we group everything together, it might feel like this big blob that we don't actually know how to be with. But when we take each piece apart, it's actually not as scary as overwhelming. And then the next one is really the riding the wave, right? So the stun wave, the wave, we're going to ride the wave. So it's like this perspective of being able to like ride the wave of your experience or urges, noticing that these emotions will have, like they'll go up, they'll go peak, and then they'll go down, and it might be many waves that you're going to need to learn to ride. Can you start to practice that, really intentionally being with it, giving it some space, and like allowing the experience to just come and go, and seeing as much as possible if you can give that room without necessarily needing to act on that urge or that initial instance of just like reaction because you're feeling this emotional experience. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't eventually engage in some type of behavior. Again, if you want to engage in a behavior, whether that's a coping strategy, another coping strategy, or you want to actually use this emotion to inform some type of action, great. But really, this is about creating that space and helping you move through that intense peak without letting that emotion, just purely emotional mind, dictate what you want to do without tapping into maybe that rational mind. Tapping into like a very intentional values-based decision here, because you're just letting emotions take over the show. So here's an example of how it would look like in practice. Imagine it's like Monday morning, you just got into the office, your inbox is like pinging, your Teams chat is going off, and then your boss also sends you a message like, here's a new project that you have to do on top of everything else that you have to do. And all of a sudden you notice this like tension, this like your heart starts getting really tight. And so here's a cue where you would really clearly say like, okay, something's going on, right? Like, so this is the piece where you just have to notice like, okay, something is happening for me. Okay, so how could I apply STUNWAVE? So sensations, like noticing the sensations, right? So maybe there's tightness in your chest. Maybe you're feeling really red, really hot, right? That's the experience, right? If you picture that gingerbread again, like you could even point to where you experience that. The T is the thoughts, where you start thinking like, I can't believe my boss gave me this again. He's so insensitive. He has no awareness of what's going on. I can't do this. I'm going to quit. I can't handle this no more. I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to like tell him off and quit. And so the thoughts is just like all the thoughts that are happening in your mind. It might even be something like, I can't handle this. This is too much and whatnot. And I want to be really clear here, because eventually we talked about you're going to take action. Is it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to kind of listen to some of those thoughts, but at least initially not just being impulsively and doing something that would be unhelpful just because you're feeling this feeling. So that you really is noticing that urge. So like I mentioned it before, it might be to tell off your boss, it might be to respond very fiercely, something very aggressive, not assertive. Maybe it's to like get up very loudly so everyone in your office knows you're pissed off. Maybe it's to go vent really angrily to your friend, but everyone else can hear you. Whatever that is, it's just really noticing what that urge is, and without actually doing anything, being really clear, like the driving force here is to do this. And then the N is naming that emotion. So like really checking in with yourself. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling frustrated? Maybe not angry, maybe it's more frustrated, right? Not as like pure anger, but it's a little bit less. Like name that emotion. I'm going to just say here, maybe you feel angry, right? So that anger is really kind of causing you to want to do something. It feels unfair. So you want to be reactive in this moment. And finally, riding the wave is really kind of taking a step back. So it might even be helpful to like, focus on your breathing, and not to get rid of or make this experience go away, but just to kind of have a moment of like, okay, I'm riding this experience. So like taking a pause before you even reply to any emails, reply to your boss, just really kind of taking a moment to ride this experience. Maybe giving yourself like 15 minutes where you're just like, I'm just gonna like not do anything. Maybe I'm going to do some other like shift and do some admin work that doesn't involve anyone else, or maybe I'm just gonna really notice the waves of this anger coming up and down. And I want to be really clear, at least for now, not fueling the fire of the thoughts of what you should do or you shouldn't do, because thoughts can just really further flame the experience, versus giving yourself at least this initial space to ride the feeling until it feels like, okay, some of this emotion has reduced in intensity, and then I can be intentional about what I want to do, right? So maybe 30 minutes later, you still want to say like, okay, do I really want to listen to any of these thoughts of like, I need to quit, this is an injustice, or how do I really want to respond to my boss, right? Maybe I do want to respond back of like, hey, you know what? There's a lot on my plate. I'm not sure if you remember that I have X, Y, and Z, so I can't do this, or I have to push back the deadline. Whatever the case is, even if you want to be assertive, but maybe you want to respond, you want to give yourself some time to respond to that. And again, maybe that night you go home and you talk to your family, your partner, and say like, I really need to consider another avenue or whatnot. But at least initially, I want you to be able to ride that wave and be intentional about how you want to respond. I'm thinking of creating a worksheet that goes with this skill. So comment STUN to let me know that's something you want. And if I do create it, then I'll send you the link to sign up for it. So comment STUN. If you really like some of these concrete skills and tools, check out this video I did on the worry tree. It's another skill that you can start applying, using in your life right away. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.